Welcome, I hope your coffee is warm. Mine is. Today we are building a Dimir deck, and the Dimir are all about being secretive, being kind of mean and stealing stuff, and being sneaky again. Honestly, there's a lot of sneaking around, and it might be just because your creatures are unblockable, but it could also be because you are not telling people your game plan, or you're not really telling people how strong you really are. The colors are black for the self and doing whatever you want. You are trying to further your plan. And honestly, in this color combination, you really shouldn't think about what other people think about you. And then there's blue for controlling and perfection and towards getting to perfection. Blue is for controlling and trying to make sure that others can't play the game. So you are trying to get your game plan on, and you are great at stopping others from getting their game plan on. We are definitely not red. That's just for doing whatever. We are doing things because we planned them to be so. We don't just do things because we want to do so. We are not white because we don't care about the people we play with. We don't mind being the enemy, and we don't mind being not trusted by our friends. It's a game, or so they believe. And we're not green because we don't care about the largest creatures or about nature. We more so care about control. And then secondly, we care about our win con. That is more of a combo and doesn't necessarily need to be a big creature. Then we have some themes which are more topical and are all about murdering in our case. We love to murder people to death. We are cunning, we are scheming, we are not out in the open, we don't even want to be seen. We'd rather have the other players forget we are there. And generally we are being sneaky. We're getting little pieces of damage in here and there and just not trying to be the arch enemy too much, because honestly people will see us as the arch enemy anyways. And then we love mind control stuff, so making sure that we take control of other people's creatures, that we are milling their deck, and that we are discarding their hands. And lastly, we do love a little bit of cosmic horror stuff, so aliens, maybe some tentacles or zombies or stuff like that. So what to expect in this video, we will go by the strengths and weaknesses of Dimir, by the commanders to choose. We have a whole top 20 in here because there are so many popular Dimir commanders. We go by some deck building and playstyle tips, the staples that you will definitely need in any Dimir deck. I love having these in my collection because then if you want another deck you can just go for it and you have those staples in there. We'll go by the combos, which are more prevalent in this case than the other win cons. Usually there are more other win cons, but here we have more combos than anything else. And then we go a little bit from budget to upgrade in those staples that you will need. So that's it for this video. Let's start with the strengths and weaknesses. For the strengths and weaknesses, we start with the purpose of the Dimir. The purpose of Dimir is to control and often to play games outside of the board state, where other colors, I think all of Naya, wants to be on board. We really don't care about it. We like milling our opponents, we like making our opponents discard, perhaps countering their spells before they even enter, but we're really not here to be on board. We like inevitability, but not in a Golgari way, more so through making sure that we get to that smart combo that makes us feel smarter than our friends. So we're not here to grind the board out and sacrifice creatures. We are here to win in one fell swoop. And we are supposed to be the enemy. Maybe Grixis is a bit worse, but Dimir is definitely one of those color combinations that people will see and they will think, I don't know if I like this one. Our strengths are controlling the board. We are good at that. We are good at removing. We are good at countering. We are good at making sure that other people are not on the board. And if we fail to do that, we won't win because we won't have the strongest creatures on there. But this is the strength. So let's not talk about weaknesses yet. We are great at combinations to finish the game in one turn. So there are many ways to mill ourselves out and win through that way, or perhaps making sure that our opponents don't have any cards in their decks and they don't have that win con. We are great at making people feel powerless, that they have nothing left in their decks. I'm chuckling because it's kind of evil. And we love to annoy people with milling their decks. People don't like seeing their good stuff in their graveyards most of the time. Stealing their stuff, which is even more annoying because then you can't play your commander again or stuff like that. Or controlling their plays, which people don't like because they were so excited about it. Then our weaknesses. We are definitely weak on board. I said this before, but this is our biggest weakness. We are not that big. We have little to no simple win conditions. It is not just play a big guy and now you're winning like green often does. And it's really hard to explain the power level of a Dimir deck because, there are so many ways to play some Dimir commanders that, people are instantly afraid that you have the really strong version of it. And if you are really strong, then you will need to explain, yeah, I have a good plan, trust me. The Dimir mindset is, I will beat you on my own time. You don't need to show off at first. You will show off in your last turn. I don't care about what you think of me, so you really don't mind if you are being a bit mean to your friends. I have my own game plan. You really don't care about what other people are doing, really. You want to stop what they're doing, but you don't want to see it. You just want to do your own thing. And that's the last thing you want. You, the opponent, can't play their own game. You don't want them to. You don't want to see it. You don't want to have them dictate the game. You are the one in control. Then on to our top 20 commanders and their archetypes. And first off, we have, I think, the most Dimir archetype, which is milling your opponents. It's annoying, but also fun to do if you are the one doing it. I have to admit. There are two ways to go about this. Two commanders that basically work kind of the same way, but in reverse. The first one is Captain Nugathrot. I don't know. I think that's how you say it. It's a big guy, 5 mana, that says horrors you control have menace. Has menace himself as well because of this. And then says whenever a horror, a menace as well, you control deals common damage to a player, that player mills that many cards. So you want to attack with your big horrors and then make your opponents mill a bunch of cards. And then at the beginning of your end step, you get to choose one of the artifacts or creatures that they milled and put it onto the battlefield under your control. So what do you want in this deck? You want a bunch of cards that just mill your opponents, maybe some other cards that get to steal creatures or artifacts from their graveyard, so you have some synergy in there. And then you want big Leviathan horrors, not necessarily Leviathans, I was looking at this one, Nemesis of Reason, but big guys and preferably ones that mill, so that Leviathan is really good there. And aside from that, you want ways to damage your opponents or stuff like that for all of the cards in their graveyard. So if you can find ways to do that, that will be great. Otherwise, you can kind of try to mill your opponents out, but then you will need to have a bunch of damage coming from your horrors, and really you will kill your opponents before milling them, usually here. So not really the main focus, but you are using mill to steal their cards and then you defeat them with their own attacks. Then if you want to really mill your opponents, there is Fanax, God of Deception. He is all about milling your opponents and killing them by milling them instead of stealing their stuff by milling them. Fanax says, most importantly, creatures you control have the ability to tap, and then target player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is that creature's toughness. So basically what you want here is cards with big toughnesses. So Ruin Crab, for example, 3 toughness for a 1 mana card. Great, because then you get to mill your opponents for 3 with that, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you mill them more. You want to go more heavily on the mill in this deck. Cards like Jaws of Defeat that we have gotten from the new Tarkir Dragonstorm set are great here. You want anything that works well with big toughness, because you are a big toughness deck as well. There are two things you are here, and big toughness is one of them, even though your win condition is milling your opponents. And you want to go way harder on the mill. So make sure you have a bunch of cards that just say mill your opponent for half of their library, because that's the way you're going to win. The most popular creature type for Dimir are zombies. But before we get to them, we get to a zombie commander, Wilheld the Rod Cleaver. He is a simp in lore, but as a commander he is really good. He is a great combo commander because he is in the right colors and works with zombies himself, and so even if you don't get your combos, you can still be pretty potent with your zombie synergies. Wilheld is also a piece of some combos himself, as he makes zombies whenever another zombie you control dies, as long as it doesn't have Decay, but we will get there. The first combo I want to talk about is a really simple one that has been around for eons, I would say. Gravecrawler plus Phyrexian Altar. Gravecrawler says you may cast this card from your graveyard as long as you control a zombie, for example your commander. And then Phyrexian Altar says sacrifice a creature, add 1 mana of any color. Then you can cast the Gravecrawler for that 1 black mana that you made with the Phyrexian Altar for sacrificing it, and you can do this on repeat. So anything that works with it dying or entering back onto the battlefield will win you the game. Then you have some other ways to do this, so you will need the Rooftop Storm in your deck, a 6 mana enchantment that says you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for zombie creature spells you cast, basically making the Gravecrawler in that manner free, and so anything that sacrifices a creature immediately will net you mana for keeping to, well, just keep playing the Gravecrawler. So basically you never really use the Gravecrawler, it's just a piece in here that you definitely need. It isn't even expensive. So easy to do that. And like I said, I promised Wilheld will be in one combo, at least. Wilheld says whenever another zombie dies, you create a zombie, but you can only create a zombie from zombies that aren't decayed, and Wilheld will create one that has the ability Decayed. So pair that with the card Puppet Factory, that will make all of your creature tokens into 3/3s without abilities, and you will get to sacrifice that 3/3 again to make sure that you can keep cycling this through and through. So the only thing you will need again is something to sacrifice your creatures. So make sure you have a bunch of things to sacrifice your creatures with. Make sure you have zombies that are really easy to get back, and make sure you have a way to make doing that free or to get the mana back. And then you will have an infinite cycle really easily. That's really the strength of zombies. So you can choose to play Wilheld as a zombie commander. I think he is one of the best, but really it's hard not to combo off with him. So that's what I said before, it's really hard in Dimir to sometimes explain the power level of your deck. You will need to make sure that you won't play the combos or not put them in your deck, but that's a little bit weird because it will make it weaker. But if you don't want to play it in a combo way, you just need cards that strengthen your zombies and then play a bunch of zombies. And then they will attack and you will basically not care if they die because you will get some of them back. That's basically what zombies are. Another flavor of this is the Gisa and Geralf combination, but this is basically another way to say play zombies and return them from your graveyard. Gisa and Geralf does help you mill some cards, so that is one piece of the puzzle that you need in a zombie deck. But other than that, their main ability is that once during each of your turns you may cast a zombie creature spell from your graveyard. So you are recurring them anyways. That's what Wilheld wanted to do. But he creates tokens and you get your one zombie back. So cards that are bigger zombies will be better here. Think of Grey, Merchant, Gary. Think of Gary sometimes. But there is an actual other flavor for zombies, and that is the Scarab God. How is this different? Because the Scarab God does get to return himself and does get to return other creatures. Well, you exile target creature card from a graveyard and create a zombie. So really, if you want, you don't have to play zombies in this kind of way, but it is the cool way to do it. So I'm putting him in there with the zombie commanders, but you can really play him as a basic reanimator god, but he's not the best at doing that. So play him as a zombie commander because it is on theme. Things you want to do here are returning your zombies. This time you don't really care about the effect too much because it is a little bit more expensive to get most creatures back, and you will only get to do it once. So you can't cycle the Grey Merchant, you can't cycle Gary, really, because you need to exile them in order to make a token copy. So it's not really the same. Really, my biggest advice for playing this commander is have fun with making the tokens for them, because you get to make Eternals out of all of your zombies, and that is a cool way to play them. Other than that, I would say just play around with the bigger zombies that have an effect on their own or that are great to have out there and that you want to attack with. Not just on the lords in this case. And there's another flavor, a flavor that you really want to not think about how it tastes, but it's Grim Grin, the corpse born. Born as a corpse. Think about that. What does that mean? I honestly don't know. Tell me if you know it. Big guy enters tapped and doesn't untap during your untap step. But how do you untap him? Well, you sacrifice another creature. Then whenever Grim Grin attacks, you destroy target creature defending player controls. And every time you cycle through these effects, Grim Grin gets a +1 counter. So he grows and gets even bigger. So what do you want here? Well, ways to have creatures return to the battlefield. And zombies are great at that. So he's a great commander because of it. Really, he's not really a lord to your zombies or anything. He's a lord to himself perhaps. But more than anything, you want things that return easily to the battlefield. Dimir can actually play in a cantrip deck. Usually that is the Izzet thing to do, but we have gotten the Lord of the Nazgul. And the Lord of the Nazgul says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you create a 3/3 with menace. So that's a great effect. Just play a 1 mana spell and you get a 3/3 with that. So if you can keep cycling through your 1 mana spells, you will quickly get 9 or more of these wraiths. And that means that the Lord of the Nazgul makes sure that those creatures will get base power and toughness 9/9. That's a lot. So what do you want in this deck? A bunch of cantrips, like Opt, which says 1 mana, scry 1, draw a card. Then you will get a new spell that will cost 1. And then you will get another 3/3. So that's basically how it works. So you want other cards that work well with a bunch of instants and sorceries being played. So perhaps you draw a card whenever an instant or sorcery spell is cast. And perhaps if you are getting feisty with it, you play more wraiths. So you can get a sort of typo deck. Because if you have 9, all of these will be 9/9s as a base power and toughness. If you like trash, there are discard commanders for the Dimir. And the Dimir aren't really about that way of discarding where you just discard them because you don't care about your cards. No, actually you really care about your cards and you love whatever is discarded. That is a trope that the Dimir are about because they love the weak ones and they love to take advantage of them, honestly. Oscar, the Rubbish Reclaimer, is one of those people that really love rubbish. He gets cheaper for every different mana value among cards in your graveyard, so it is really easy to replay this commander. And whenever you discard a non-land card, you may cast it from your graveyard. So what do you want? Things that make discarding better. So like Bone Miser, which helps you get mana, get creatures, get cards, all the things you want. Ghostly Pilferer will help you discard cards. It has an instant ability that can have you discard a card at any time you really want. Basically, that's what you want from the Ghostly Pilferer. And the Secrets of the Dead, for example, is a card that works well with casting spells from your graveyard, because you will get to draw a card and then you can discard that again. So that's basically the game plan. Then we have the next archetype, which is exiling cards. And we are not really here for exiling cards because we want to draw them or use them or anything. Now we are here because we need them to be exiled because we don't want our opponents to do anything. The greatest example, I think, is Umbris Fur? He's not Fur. No, he's Fear Manifest. He is Fear. Basically a pet of Ashok. And Umbris says he gets +1/+1 for each card your opponents own in exile. So we delight in the fact that they had nightmares and can't really think anymore because they had too many nightmares. And then whenever Umbris or another nightmare or another horror enters the battlefield under your control, target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a land card. So we want nightmares, we want horrors, that's one thing. Another thing is a nightmare muse, Ashok, because Ashok always loves exiling cards. And of course it's thematic here, because of the smoky things and being a pet. Ashok also says, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, then the player exiles a card from their hand. So they exile something. Also didn't want to, it's hard to talk about Ashok. Let's just say that. And -7, you may cast up to 3 face-up cards your opponents own from exile without paying their mana costs. So eventually you do get them back, but really we want them to exile everything and keep it there. Cards like Endless Evil, well, not really cards, there isn't really anything like it, because it's so good here. 3 mana, enchant Umbris, and at the beginning of your upkeep you create a token that's a copy of enchanted creature except it's a 1/1. But Umbris was already a 1/1, so we really love how this is happening. And really we don't care about the fact that one of them gets removed because it is legendary, because whenever Umbris or another nightmare or horror enters the battlefield under your control, you get that whole exile effect, and now you get 2 of them, so that's great. But otherwise you can keep creating more horrors and still the same happens, but a little bit less cool. And then we have Whisper Silk Cloak, which helps you make Umbris unblockable, and as it will be really big, you will win the game this way with damage as Dimir. So that's really a goal on its own. Then we have another sort of exile commander, but really isn't as cool as Umbris, because Tasha is really about stealing your opponent's stuff. So really isn't about exiling. But Tasha says, mostly, -3, you may cast a spell from among cards in exile with page counters on them without paying its mana cost. And then draw a card for each opponent, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard and put a page counter on it. That's how you get the page counter things. So you slowly exile something from their graveyard and then you get to cast that spell without paying its mana cost. So playing big spells from your opponents that they had already cast. That's what you want to do here. And other than that, you really want to steal your opponent's stuff, because honestly that's what we're here for. So that's it. Then there are many decks in Dimir or commanders in Dimir that could be played as a control commander, but I think the best here is Alela, and weirdly it's because they can make creatures that can get in there for some damage. So really what you want to do in this deck is use Alela to say whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, you create a 1/1 black fairy rogue creature token with flying. So you create a 1/1 with flying whenever you play your first spell during each opponent's turns. And why is this a control deck then? Because you will want to play instant sorceries and flash creatures and stuff like that. So you want to wait back, create some 1/1s and slowly kill your opponents with 1 damage at a time. And whenever 1 or more fairies you control deal common damage to a player, you get to goad a creature that player controls. So you also get to make them destroy each other, but really you are here to make sure that your opponents can play their game plans. So the biggest thing you want to play is forms of counter spells and removal and stuff like that, so that your opponents can play their game plans, and if they can, they do it under your control by being goaded and attacking only your opponents until it's too late and you have too many fairies and you can kill them to death. Really a Dimir deck. So other thing you want to play is a sort of card that will be good with fairies, so making them bigger, protecting them, having flash on their own, so you can play them on your opponent's turns and make another fairy with them. And that's it. Simple. Then here's a bit of a weird archetype for Dimir, because it's really not about the archetype itself, top decking. Mirko, Obsessive Theorist, is great at getting the right top deck. Mirko says at the beginning of your end step, you may return target feature cards with power less than Mirko's from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So really it's about recursion. And whenever you surveil, you put a +1 counter on Mirko, making it easier to get those creatures back. But surveilling, that's one thing, but Mirko really doesn't do anything with top decking. So how can you call this a top deck? Well, you want other cards that surveil a lot, so you will have many ways to surveil and make sure that your top deck is perfect, or that you have the perfect cards in your graveyard, of course, because you will have a bunch of cards in your graveyard to recur. But having the right top deck means that you can find your combos easier. So definitely make sure that you put some combos in here. Doesn't even need to be a good one. Maybe you have some combos that require 3, maybe even 4 spells to make it go off. Well, you can probably find them with this deck. So that's basically what this is about. Now, you'd think this commander is all about ninjutsu, and ninjutsu is the coolest way to be aggressive with Dimir, perhaps. Without being grindy, at least. But Yuriko is more popular even as a CEDH commander. Why? Because Yuriko adds a bunch of things. So one is that Yuriko is pretty aggressive, which is pretty cool for a CEDH deck that wants to go really fast. The ability is to have ninjutsu. For just 2 mana, you can return an unblocked attacker, put Yuriko onto the battlefield in its stead, tapped at attacking, and then whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, any ninja, although I usually just see Yuriko attacking, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. So there's a little bit of card draw there, which of course CEDH loves, and each opponent loses life equal to that card's mana value. So often you will get to deal 10 damage to all of your opponents. That's how fast Yuriko can be, at least. So what do you need here? Cards like Ornithopter that are cheap to play and can easily attack without being blocked on the next turn. So make sure you have some creatures that will attack on at least the second turn. And then cards that have really high mana value. Maybe 10, maybe 11, maybe 9 sometimes, but you want to deal sort of fourths of your opponent's life totals. And of course, Yuriko is a great card for controlling. You have blue and black, which are great controlling colors that will stop your opponents from doing their game plan stuff. But you are also great at drawing cards, because you have blue and black, which are great at drawing cards, and you have your commander, which also helps you draw a bit with all of the ninjas attacking. So you will be a great combo deck yourself. So make sure you have those great CEDH combos in there, and make sure that you are a little bit aggressive, and then you will be a flexible CEDH deck. Then we have a bit of a weird deck, which I don't really know which archetypes to put this in, but I would say perhaps Reanimator or Clones. And Hidetsugu and Kairi is the name of this commander set. These guys enter the battlefield, you draw 3 cards, put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order you want, and then when they die, you exile the top card of your library, and then target opponent loses life equal to its mana value, and if it's an instant or sorcery, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. So what do you want? I want, personally, a way to sacrifice Hidetsugu to make sure that we get that die trigger whenever we want. Cloning can be great, or recursion like I said, but we want multiple versions of Hidetsugu and Kairi onto the battlefield. If we are starting to clone Hidetsugu and Kairi, that does mean that we get 2 of them. They are legendary, so one of them dies. So that's a really easy way to make sure that one of them dies and you get that trigger. And then last but not least, definitely not least, you want cards that are really expensive that you can play with Hidetsugu and make sure that you deal a bunch of damage to your opponents. Then of course ninjutsu is still the color combination for... Well, Dimir is the color combination for ninjutsu. And Yuriko will be the first commander there, because always has been. Basically that's the reason. The only difference with the CEDH version is that it will be way cheaper. Well, then there's two differences. The second difference is that you will be playing way more ninjas. And you want a bunch of cards that work well with ninjas. That say draw more cards whenever a ninja deals damage to your opponents, or maybe that make them stronger. Satoru Umezawa is in my eyes maybe even a little bit cooler because he's an Umezawa and all the stories and such. But also because the mechanic is a little bit different. Here you want to play bigger ninjas. Satoru says whenever you activate a ninjutsu ability, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library, once each turn. But more importantly, each creature card in your hand, doesn't even need to be a ninja, has ninjutsu 4. So you can play this with big creatures or with big ninjas, which is more thematical. So that's basically what you want to do. Get those big creatures out onto the battlefield and make sure that they kill your opponent. Really a great commander, doesn't really do the work himself. Usually with reds you want to play mono black, but there is an option for Dimir that's really great. Vren the Relentless is great with reds, but really is more about the controlling again. With most Dimir decks this will happen, even if they are supposed to be creature type decks. Vren the Relentless says if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. So here we are already noting that we want to kill our opponent's creatures, so we want a bunch of murder spells. Then at the beginning of each end step you create X 1/1 reds with this creature gets +1/+1 for each other red you control, so basically a red colony. Then that will happen where X is the number of creatures your opponents controlled that were exiled this turn, or basically destroyed, because if a creature an opponent controls will die, you exile it instead, so that works. So what do you want to use with this as well, aside from all of the murder spells? Well, things that strengthen your reds, and again, that's it. Then we have 2 commanders that we have seen before that were about mill and exiling, but really could be used in a creature type deck with horrors. It's Captain Negathrond and Umbris. They are great friends, they want to be in each other's decks, and really they play basically the same, where you want to attack with your horrors, make them enter the battlefield and mill your opponents at the same time. So that's basically it. Really, they don't really work with horrors that much. Captain Negathrond says they have menace. That's it. And Umbris doesn't even care about your horrors, aside from them entering the battlefield, of course. So really you can play anything with this that loves horrors. Maybe you want big horrors, or playing a bunch of them, maybe replaying them. So really you are flexible in this, but mostly what you want to do is have them out on the battlefield, look at them and scaring your opponents with their arts. So with the Dimir there are a few choices you need to make when choosing your commander. You first have to choose if you even want to attack with creatures at all, or perhaps you want to play purely controlling and win by combinations of cards instead of just attacking. So going creatures, I think you should pick one of the types that are good in this color combinations. Zombies, rats, horrors or ninjutsu, basically your choices. Going control, think first about how competitive you want to be. Then think if you want to be combo-like or slow and grindy with perhaps a touch of milling your opponents out slowly. So for combos and finishers, we have not too many just finishers. You are about combos. One sort of finisher is Gary, Grey Merchant of Asphodel, as it can be recurred sometimes. Maybe you can blink it or something like that, and then every time each opponent loses X life or X your devotion to black. A little bit weird in a color combination that has 2 colors, but really there aren't many others. And controlling also means that you can be slow with your win conditions. You don't need those if you aren't too competitive. But if you are competitive, then there are many ways to win the game via combinations of cards. The most popular one, well, it's not really popular, but it's really good and a little bit too good sometimes, is Demonic Consultation or something like that, plus Thessa's Oracle or something like that. And the greatest combinations are combinations that feature twice the words or something like that, because then you can have multiple ways to win the game with the same combination. And with each extra card in a 2-card combination, you will find it infinitely easier to do so. So what does this mean? Well, you cast Demonic Consultation, and then you name Thessa's Oracle, and so you will exile your library due to not having a card named Thessa's Oracle in your library, and then you just cast Thessa's Oracle, so you also don't need too much mana here, which also means that you can keep some counters up usually, and then when Thessa's Oracle enters the battlefield, you win the game because you have no deck left, and that's it. Then the next one is Duskmantle Guildmage plus Mindcrank, and this is great for all of those mill decks, but not too hard to put into your deck. Although honestly, you should be focused on mill with these two. So there are a couple of things that you need. So Duskmantle Guildmage does need to be on the battlefield, and you need some extra mana for those abilities to trigger. Another possibility is that you start milling your opponents by having something else out on the battlefield, but then it's a 3-card combo, and we are not looking for those. So basically what you do is you activate the Guildmage's ability, which says whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere this turn, that player loses 1 life. And you can also already see how it works with Mindcrank, because whenever an opponent loses life, that player mills that many cards. So now we just need to do the one or the other, and we get an infinite cycle. So we could pay for mana to have this be a 2-card combination, to have target player put the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So that then means that your cards enter the graveyard, or the cards enter your graveyard. The player loses 1 life for each of those cards. So you resolve one of those losses of 1 life, and then you get to start the mind cranking, because when they lose that life, they mill that many cards. So they mill 1 card, which means they lose another life, and then you are not even getting to the second milled card. You will just win the game, or mill them, or defeat them. Next up is Azarak the Arc Lich and Rooftop Storm. And Rooftop Storm is really a stormy card. It is in many combinations as I have showed you before, but this one is one I haven't showed you yet. So what happens is Rooftop Storm says you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for zombies creature spells you cast. So that basically means that you are going sort of infinite if you have infinite zombies. So what happens, Azarak will enter the battlefield, so you get to return it to your hand, and you will venture into the dungeon, and then each time you trigger the Dark Pool Room ability, each opponent will lose 1 life and you gain 1 life. And you repeat this until your opponents are out of life, and you basically have everything you need and many infinites that go off at the same time. Then in Dimir we have the artifact that is very famous for combos, Time Sieve. This is in many combinations, but here we have a colorless card that we need to pair with it. Thopter Assembly. 6 mana card that says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control no Thopters other than Thopter Assembly, return it to its owner's hand and create 5 artifacts. Don't even care about them being Thopters or them being flying or whatever, but it just says 5 exactly. I don't know why this is made so perfectly. 5 artifacts, and then Time Sieve says sacrifice 5 artifacts, take an extra turn after this one. So just make sure that you are not accidentally making more Thopters, because then you won't get the Thopter Assembly back. But in any other case, you will have infinite turns. And maybe also the sacrificing is a thing that you can work with. So you will have infinite die triggers, and you will have infinite sort of enter the battlefield with tokens at least. Then Ashnod's Altar is at the base of many combinations, because you get to sacrifice a creature at instant speed when it is out. And usually, well, in many cases you don't really care about the mana that you get from it, but in this case you do. So as long as Haven Ghoul Lich is out on the battlefield and the altar is out on the battlefield, you can do this. So that does mean that you need an 8 mana investment. So not really the cleanest of combos. So we are starting to see here why the first one was so good for just being 3 mana instead of 8, for example. But in this case, you activate the altar by sacrificing the creature that can be cast using just 1 mana. So 1 mana to pay for you may cast target creature card in the graveyard this turn. When you cast that card this turn, Haven Ghoul Lich gains all the activated abilities of that card until end of turn. So you use the 1 mana to pay for the Haven Ghoul Lich, and that means that you can cast the sacrifice creature from your graveyard this turn, then you cast the creature by paying its mana cost, and then you repeat this process for infinite cycling. Then the Mind Skinner and Sir Conrad. I mean, in this color combination there are just so many combo pieces that work so well on their own that they really don't need too much from the other card that they are in a combo with. So Sir Conrad says whenever another creature dies or a creature is put into the graveyard from the battlefield or a creature leaves the graveyard, or then it almost feels like it says whenever something happens, deal 1 damage to each opponent. So you are equally